1665, a deadly plague spread across England, killing millions of people. Fear and panic filled every village and town. During this chaos, religious fanatics began to claim that the plague was caused by demons and accused innocent women of witchcraft, saying they had brought the plague upon the people. Thousands of these women were brutally tortured and executed in the name of religion. Years later, a woman named Grace lives with her young daughter Abby in a quiet house. Her husband Joseph has recently died, leaving her and their little daughter alone. Not long ago, Grace and Joseph lived peacefully in a small rented house far from the city. They had moved there to escape the plague that was spreading everywhere. Joseph often went to town to sell their crops, and sometimes he stopped at a local bar for a drink. One day at the bar, he met their landlord, Boomer. They drank together for a while, but after Boomer left, Joseph realized that one of the men at the bar had been infected with the plague. Joseph rushed back home, shaking with fear. As his health worsened, he begged Grace to collect some herbs from the forest. But before she could help him, Joseph made a desperate choice. He hanged himself, hoping to prevent the disease from spreading to his family. Back in the present, Boomer arrives at Grace's home with his servant Edwin, demanding the rent payment. Grace pleads for more time, but Boomer refuses. With no other choice, she sets out for the city. Along the way, Grace meets an old friend named Kate and her husband Ben. She leaves Abby in Kate's care for safety and continues alone. In the city, Grace visits the bar and begs the owner for a loan. He refuses, but then tells her something shocking. Boomer had deliberately switched Joseph's drink that night, giving him the one infected with the plague. Grace is crushed, realizing her husband's death was part of Boomer's cruel plan. That night, Grace couldn't sleep. Boomer is coming again the next morning for the rent. Suddenly, Joseph's spirit appears before her and tells her to sell his wedding ring to survive. The next morning, Grace digs up his grave, finds the ring, and cleans it with trembling hands. When Boomer returns with Edwin, Grace offers both her own ring and Joseph's wedding band as payment. But Boomer refuses the offer. Instead, he tries to force himself on her. But Grace grabs a red-hot iron rod and burns his hand, then points a gun at him and forces him to leave. Humiliated, Boomer shouts that she will regret this and storms out. Later that night, Grace remembers her dark childhood. When she was young, her mother was accused of witchcraft by a cruel witch hunter named Moorcroft. Her mother was innocent, but when she refused to confess, the hunters threatened to kill little Grace. To save her daughter, the woman falsely confessed and was burned alive in front of everyone. Back in the present, Boomer goes to the bar and spreads lies about Grace. He tells the townspeople that she must be a witch since her husband died of the plague, yet she never got sick. He also claims she attacked him when he tried to collect rent. The frightened and drunken crowd, already filled with fear after executing a woman named Molly for witchcraft, turns against Grace because Molly had once been Grace's friend. That night, while Grace was putting Abby to bed, masked men broke into the house. She grabbed Abby and ran upstairs, but they set the house on fire. Grace barely escaped, only to be captured by Boomer. Abby was taken away and Grace was thrown into a cold, dark prison cell. Elsewhere, Kate argues with Ben, angry that he helped Boomer. She tells him that Grace is innocent, but Ben slaps her and says that if he hadn't supported Boomer, they would have been next. Meanwhile in the cell, Grace meets a teenage girl named Astrid who was locked up for stealing food. Astrid warns her that the witch hunters will torture her until she confesses. She softly tells her that once she admits it, they will kill her anyway and urges her not to give up. The next morning, Grace is dragged into the town square. She is tied to a post and whipped across her back until her dress turns red with blood, but Grace doesn't scream or cry. When the torture ends for the day, Boomer tells Edwin that Moorcroft himself will arrive tomorrow to question Grace. He then mocks Grace, saying that if she had obeyed him, none of this would be happening. Grace replies that she would rather die than surrender to him. That night, Grace begs Edwin to find her daughter. Feeling pity for her, Edwin sneaks out to search for Abby. As soon as he leaves, Boomer returns, this time with Moorcroft and his assistant Leonora. Moorcroft leans close to Grace and whispers that her suffering will begin the next morning. That night, Grace dreams about her mother, who tells her not to forget who she is and to keep fighting. At dawn, a guard throws a bucket of cold water on Grace to wake her. Moorcroft orders Leonora to inspect her for signs of witchcraft. Leonora rips Grace's clothes and examines every part of her body. Finally, she points to an old scar on Grace's neck. Moorcroft smiles coldly and declares that it's the devil's mark. The torture will now begin until she confesses being a witch. Grace is once again locked in her dark cell, yet still refusing to confess to a crime she did not commit. After some time, Edwin comes to Grace's cell and quietly tells her that Boomer has locked Abby in a room with a nurse. Grace begs Edwin to save her daughter, but before he can reply, guards arrive and force him to leave. The next morning, Grace is tied to a wooden post for another round of torture. Moorcroft beats Grace cruelly, but even through the unbearable pain, she refuses to scream or confess. When the torture ends, the guards throw her back into her cell. Later, Leonora talks to Moorcroft and says she doesn't believe Grace is a witch. Moorcroft answers coldly that if Grace is innocent, then God will save her, just as he once saved Leonora. It turns out that years ago, Moorcroft had accused Leonora of witchcraft and tried to burn her alive, but heavy rain suddenly began to fall and extinguish the flames. Since then, Leonora has believed that God saved her and has followed Moorcroft faithfully. Feeling pity, Leonora visits Grace and urges her to confess. She says that if Grace truly is a witch, then God will protect her. Grace realizes Leonora has been completely brainwashed and tells Leonora to escape from the devil before it destroys her too. The next day, Grace is again tied to the wooden post. Moorcroft gives her one final chance to confess. But Grace looks straight into his eyes and says that she will not admit to something she didn't do just to survive. Furious, Moorcroft brings out a horrific torture device with sharp blades. He inserts it into Grace, causing her to scream in agony, but even then, she refuses to confess. Everyone in the room is horrified. No ordinary person could survive such pain. Moorcroft then declares that only a witch could survive such pain and announces that both Grace and Abby will be burned alive the next day. Grace cries and begs him to at least spare her daughter, but Moorcroft remains unmoved. Meanwhile, Kate and her husband Ben are traveling on horseback. Kate tells Ben that she will tell everyone the truth, that Grace is not a witch, even if it means she dies for it. Ben becomes furious, pushes her off the horse and starts beating her. Kate fights back, strikes him with a rock and scares the horse. The frightened horse runs and Ben's head is crushed, killing him instantly. That night, Edwin secretly brings food for Grace. She convinces him to help her escape. Edwin agrees and goes to Moorcroft, pretending that Grace wants to speak with him privately. Curious, Moorcroft orders the guards to clean her up and bring her to him. Grace is reunited with Abby, and her face fills with joy when she sees her daughter alive. Soon after, Edwin arrives with a bottle of wine that he secretly poisoned. Moorcroft sends everyone away and begins drinking with Grace, trying to make her confess once again. Grace realizes the wine is poisoned, but she drinks it anyway. She knows she will be executed the next day, so she decides to take Moorcroft with her. When he least expects it, Grace grabs a knife and drives it through both his hands, pinning him to the table. Moorcroft screams in pain but cannot move. At the same time, Abby is still locked in Boomer's room. Boomer, completely drunk, stumbles in and collapses on the bed. Edwin sneaks inside to rescue Abby, but she starts crying. Before Boomer can react, Edwin hits him on the head and knocks him unconscious. Back in Moorcroft's room, Leonora attacks Grace, and a violent fight breaks out. Grace pushes Leonora to the fire, and the room catches fire during the chaos. Moorcroft, still trapped and bleeding, can only watch helplessly as the flames spread around him. Edwin rushes in and helps Grace escape. Before leaving, Grace places a gun in front of Moorcroft and runs out with Edwin. Outside, Edwin takes Abby to safety while Grace locks herself in another room thinking she's poisoned. Edwin tells her that the wine she drank wasn't poisoned because Boomer drank it. Shocked but satisfied, Grace realizes Boomer will soon die. Before she can escape, a guard appears and blocks her way. She tells Edwin to run with Abby while she stays behind and kills the guard. She then goes to free the other prisoners, but Boomer appears, still alive and furious. He attacks her and a brutal fight begins. Grace finally overpowers him and slits his throat, killing him for all the pain he caused her and Joseph. Meanwhile, Moorcroft struggles to pull the knives from his hands. He grabs the gun Grace left behind and tries to shoot himself, but the gun is empty. Realizing he has no way out, he is consumed by the fire. Elsewhere, Grace imagines seeing Joseph's spirit near a well. She walks toward it slowly and jumps in. At sunrise, Edwin brings Abby safely to Kate, who embraces her with relief. In the last scene, Grace emerges from a river holding a sword, alive and strong as the story comes to an end.